Well, our message today is actually called The Path Less Traveled. And my subtitle is The Path from Resentment to Contentment. And we're continuing our annual theme material called Timeless Wisdom, Evolutionary Vision. And the theme for April, we have a new theme for this month, is Stepping into the Unknown. And today, that path from resentment to contentment. Now, this season inspires, calls forth this idea of newness, of rebirth, of growth. And therefore, it is something that you and I can take personally, in that, we're being called or motivated or moved in a direction to grow. And in our case, we're growing spiritually, that we grow in every other aspect or facet of our lives. And that means that, that journey, that spiritual journey that you are on, that I am on, is a kind of a path less traveled, because some of this is done collectively, communally, like we're doing now. But a lot of this is done on your own. And of course, the focus of our teaching is personal spiritual empowerment, personal spiritual growth that naturally evolves, that naturally connects you to all folks, all beings, all aspects of the divine everywhere. Now, this idea that the path less traveled is just doing something different. Well, we know in the Science of Mind teaching, right, that newness is preceded by thinking, meaning that your thinking is changing, your thinking is evolving, and therefore you're called to do things differently. So as you prepare your consciousness, you are replacing stinking thinking with more productive, constructive thinking. And of course, you choose the paths you take based on that new thought, that new thinking. Now, to expand that out to the collective, and this blends with the Centers for Spiritual Living overall vision, I'll call it that at the moment, universal vision, is that you envision all of humanity awakening to its spiritual magnificence. That you are discovering or rediscovering that creative power of your thought. That we all live in a world where every person gets to discover his or her own personal power and ability to create that individual life that works within a world that works for everyone. So, we are in this season of a lot of overlapping celebrations. Obviously, the root of this all is the vernal equinox. And the first religions might refer to this as Ostara. The new year in the Persian culture is celebrated on the vernal equinox, and that holiday is called, I hope I get the pronunciation close, Nowruz. And it has links to the Zoroastrian tradition, an ancient teaching in that region. It's also Holi, which is a Hindu holiday, also celebrated around the vernal equinox, and it is known as a festival of love, a festival of colors, a festival of spring. We are at the Passover, the Judaic holidays that celebrates the Exodus, the freedom, the liberation from slavery for the Hebrew people. Obviously, today is Easter Sunday in the Christian teaching, and we celebrate the resurrection of Yeshua. It also is interesting that it overlaps with another season of holidays, right? One is referred to the Ascension period, and that begins today for the next 40 days. And that was preceded by the Hebrew holiday of Shavuot, which is a springtime celebration of the Torah and the teachings, the Mosaic, the Moses teachings. So all that's going on. And my question is, like, do you feel any of this? Do you resonate with any of this? Now, I do resonate with this, and my feeling is that I am resonating more with what the energy of this season is, more of what the sort of vibration is, because before any of this really comes to my conscious awareness, I feel something shifting. And therefore, it might be these things that everybody else is responding to, the days getting longer, more warmth, more light. But sometimes people are really swept up into the faith traditions, the celebrations, the rituals, the ceremonies that take place this time of year. And it all generates some good feeling, right? Some shift, some transformation. It doesn't really matter which one it is, but I'm presuming that as I'm feeling something really shifting, something really hopeful and renewing, rebirthing, I'm guessing that others are feeling similar. But it does bring up a science of mind perspective, and I did want to share some scripture teaching today. But this comes from Romans. It says, do not imitate the way of this world. Don't imitate the way of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, that you may discern what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So the science of mind perspective is saying, when you renew your mind, you renew your life. And of course, that is a very simple and powerful teaching that has kept me engaged in this religious sciences Centers for Spiritual Living teaching for so long, because it's simple, it's basic, but it's easy, it's accessible. And so when you are renewing your mind, to a certain extent, you're resurrecting some goodness that is within you and surrounds you. And of course, that surrounding part is probably what some people like me are responding to. But it's reminding me that goodness is within me, that I ascend, you rise above something, and that something you might be rising above could have been something that served you really well for a long period in your life, as Gary was mentioning earlier, right? But you recognize that no longer serves. You bless it, you release it, you honor it, but you move on to something new, something better. And as you release that stuff that no longer serves, in its place comes something better. It comes better thinking, and with better thinking comes a better life. I think that there is an overarching metaphor, and Gary referred to this earlier, in that the bodily death of Yeshua is a way of sort of symbolizing that the life and love of living spirit lives beyond his body, right? And that the soul is naturally moving through different phases. We're all joined together in this human phase, this human expression, this earthly expression of our soul's individual journeys. And we're moving through this phase naturally, meaning there's nothing sort of put on here. It is what we are all doing. Now, at certain times, the purpose of this might be questioned. And therefore, if one diverges from a well-trodden path, is one doing that just to be different, or is one being called to do that because something else is coming up for you? Something is growing within you, and that well-trodden path is no longer serving. It's time for you to blaze a new trail, at least a new trail for you. Now recognize too, that new trail is still a trail within God, is still a trail within spirit. You're not going alone. You're just going with something that resonates more completely with you. And again, that at times might feel like you have separated from the community to do that, but it is really just, sort of a siding. It's a way for you to come about in a certain way, for you to be truer to yourself. And therefore, once you're truer to yourself, you're truer to your community. Yeshua says in Matthew, don't expect that I have come to weaken the law or the prophets. I've not come to weaken, but to fulfill. So as you make that divergence, right, realize that you are doing so to fulfill your purpose more fully, to live your life more truly to that essence of living spirit that you are. Yeshua's teachings are a culmination of really millennia of Abrahamic teachings. And of course, much of what comes from the Easter story, the crucifixion and the resurrection, was foretold in Psalms and prophets literally centuries before Yeshua came onto the scene. So, and there are even direct quotes from Old Testament scripture that are quoted in the Synoptic Gospels in telling this story of Yeshua's earthly life. So that purpose that you have is to advance your soul as much as possible during this earthly human phase. At least this is my interpretation of it. You might see it differently. And that you do that by living love and compassion. Your love and compassion in this phase lives beyond your human body's time on earth. I hope everybody feels that. Not only do you get to live a more loving and compassionate life with all of its benefits, right, with all of its attributes, but that love and compassion lives on beyond this earthly phase, and it contributes mightily to the greater good. Well, how does one do that? How does one live their purpose? Well, fortunately, in the Science of Mind, we have some nifty spiritual practices, and I'll share a few of those with you now. Meditation, as we did earlier. Gary spoke a beautiful affirmative prayer for us. Doing some spiritual study and reading. This week I was looking at the Bible and scriptures as my spiritual study and reading. Doing journaling, visioning, which I talked about in the month of March. Being of sacred service, seeing your spiritual counselor, giving as a spiritual practice, and participating in the beloved community. And what you are amplifying within you are the qualities of God. These are lists of, and this is not a comprehensive list, but these are all things that you feel as you feel better. And therefore, it's important to understand that, we focus on love and compassion, at least I am in this moment, but there are so many other facets of good feeling and therefore the qualities of God. This is your direct connection with living spirit, that you have that inward sensation of freedom, of beauty, of generosity, of intelligence, of compassion, of balance, of order, of melody. You have any of those feelings within, those are the God feelings, the good feelings that spiritual practices directly call forth within you. But it's also that moment that you notice what you're feeling as you're feeling good, that you're making, whether you're conscious of it or not, you're making a God connection in that moment. And this also from Matthew, it says, let your light thus shine before humanity, so that they may see your good works and glorify living spirit. And this is paraphrasing from the Lamsa Pashita, it's Matthew 5:16. So within you is this force to rise up, Within you is this force to ascend, to shine. And on this spiritual journey, you use that force as it uses you more frequently and more easily. In the science of mind, because so far I've pretty much talked about scripture and biblical references and Abrahamic teachings. Well, Ernest Holmes was really influenced by our Christian teachings as, received and understood in America and the West. And the distillation of the concepts and the beliefs of science of mind very closely mirror those Yeshua teachings. So I want to share a few of those, and this comes from the I believe statements of religious science, and these were published from the beginning of Ernest Holmes' teachings going back into the late 1920s. And I wanted you to, I put these in the I form because I wanted you to sort of try these on for yourself. And here's just a few of these beliefs or core teachings. It says, I believe in the eternality, the immortality, and the continuity of the individual soul forever and ever expanding. I mentioned that a few minutes ago, right? I believe that heaven is within me and that I experience it to the degree that I become conscious of it. I believe the ultimate goal of life to be complete freedom from all discord of every nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all. I believe in the unity of all life, and that the highest God and the innermost God is one God. So just sit with that for a moment and see if any of that really resonates with you. Now, during the Christian Holy Week, there is a lot of attention given to the story and the details of Yeshua's last week in his earthly expression. And, this is the journey from the crucifixion to the resurrection. And in a certain way, and I really want to respect the enormity of this teaching, but I'm going to simplify it a little bit right here, is that it is an amplification of a cycle in your life, in my life, where there is some form of offense or flaw or mistake, and a reminder that when the Bible refers to sin, this actually just means to miss the mark, to make a mistake, right? To commit an error, whether you're conscious of it or not, right? And then once that offense or flaw or mistake occurs, then there is a process of correcting. There is a process of changing course. There is a process of shifting consciousness from something that's feeling not so good to something that's feeling maybe a little better. And of course, that shift from the not feeling so good to the feeling a little better, that we refer to as healing in a metaphysical sense and in a science of mind sense. But it's also a sense of renewal. And in A Course in Miracles, that shift in consciousness is the miracle to which the Course in Miracles refers. And therefore, this path, less traveled or well traveled in my case, is a path of resentment to contentment, the path and the purpose of true forgiveness. Now, central to anyone's personal growth, and particularly mine, is this idea, this concept, this practice of forgiveness. And it is a personal process, right? And, there is a reference in Matthew that says, do I forgive somebody who's offended me 7 times? And Yeshua's answer is what? 70 times 7, right? And the important part here is not necessarily to do the math, but the important part is to say that that process of forgiveness is ongoing. There really isn't an end to it. And it's not a number of completion as would be referred to in these other numbers. For example, the 40 days between the moment that Yeshua is missing from the tomb and an angel reports that it's okay, he's in a process of rising up. That's what today commemorates. But that point from the rising up to the arrival is 40 days. So that number 40 in the Hebrew tradition is a number of completion, meaning that process to rise up might take you 40 days too, to overcome whatever it is that's getting your attention in this moment. The first thing I want to point out too in talking about forgiveness is that it really has nothing to do with the person, place, or thing that you think harmed you, that you think offended you, right? It's kind of a hollow process to me. You know, somebody says, oh, I beg your forgiveness, right? Please forgive me. Well, whether or not this other person, this other thing, this other circumstance, this other situation is forgiving in that moment, I still have a process to go through because I'm still feeling some form of resentment around this, right? No one else can do that for me. Nothing else can do it for me. It's a process that I've got to go through myself. It could be really clear what caused your resentment. It still doesn't change the fact that you're the one with the resentment, I'm the one with the resentment, and therefore it's up to me to heal. It's up to me to recognize that pain and to make a different choice. Now, the other thing I want to point out too is that healing of any wound, of any offense, of any resentment, whether it's small or large, that contributes to healing all wounds, right? If nothing else, you're kind of perfecting a practice. You're perfecting a process. And that's a process in consciousness. It's a process of consciousness that you can repeat and that you can apply to numerous conditions and circumstances in your life. Now, A Course in Miracles is really powerful in breaking down this forgiveness process. And the reason that they want to, that the Course goes in this direction, and it's kind of interesting, is that to go through this process is to eliminate forgiveness as a function in your life. So I just want to take it as read that you've done some form of preparation for this, meaning you've spent some moments in contemplation, you've spent some moments in meditation, and therefore I just invite you to close your eyes right now if you're comfortable doing that, and just become aware of that natural pattern of your breathing, just following each in-breath and each out-breath. And you might say silently to yourself, I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out. I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out. I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out. And knowing that you are completely guided, guarded, and protected, just call to your awareness a circumstance in your life where you felt offended or wronged, where you felt some form of resentment. And it could be something from the past, it could be something that's current in your life. But just call that to your awareness. And in so doing, I want you to notice the scene. I want you to notice where you are and who you are with. And I really want you now to run that script, run the dialogue of that moment. Notice what you said. Notice what was said to you. And that dialogue could be a dialogue of omission. noticing what was not said and should have been, or so you felt. And as you do that, I want you just to examine the feelings, the thoughts, the emotions working in your being in that moment. And in doing so, I want you to notice where there was a point, a break, a feeling of disconnection, a feeling of separation, a feeling of being set loose, set adrift, cut loose in some way. And in that moment, what has occurred in one form or another is that you've forgotten who you are at your essence. And therefore, your thoughts, your words had been directed in a way that was separate from God, that was separate from that divine compassion. So I just want you to notice where that moment of disconnect may have been. And notice that that is the moment of your resentment. Now, as we review this scene, and you are at that moment, you make this choice now to reconnect, to remind, to remember who you are at your essence. That you are a loving offspring of the most divine. That you are living spirit. And living spirit is so much urging you to live that living spirit in that moment. So now you choose again. You choose to stay present with living spirit, the same person, the same place, the same things, the same circumstances, the same conditions, the same words. You now infuse with the light and love of living spirit, because that is who you are at your essence. That is the truth of your being. And in so choosing, you now become one with God. You are at one-ment. And that is the meaning of the atonement. And as you make that choice for love and light and connection and compassion, you notice that things shift. The resentment is no longer there. And therefore, that need for forgiveness in this moment is no longer called for. The forgiveness is gone, and in its place is at one-ment. And in this moment, you are at one with living spirit. So as you bring your awareness back to our community, back to our gathering, I just want you to repeat these words after me. I am at home in the heart of God. My life is centered in truth. I live with a consciousness of peace. I am one with spirit and connected to all. I open to the vibrant faith within. I am living love. Happy Easter, and now it is. Well, thank you all very much.